The next item that we have on the agenda is, let me switch my view. The review and approval of the minutes. We'll start with August 2021, and you should all have a copy of those.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the August 2021 minutes.
I'll second it.
I got a motion by Councilmember Kessler-Mata and a second by Councilmember Khan. We'll do, is there any discussion on the minutes? Any public comment on the minutes?
No hands raised.
Thank you. We'll do a roll call vote. Councilmember Khan,
Yes.
Councilmember Kessler-Mata,
Yes.
Councilmember Burris,
Yes.
Councilmember Sisk,
Yes.
Councilmember Harper,
Yes.
Councilmember Giovanetti,
Yes.
Councilmember Elliott Santos,
Yes.
Councilmember Lucas,
Yes.
and Councilmember Phelps.
Yes.
Motion carries and the minutes for August are approved. We'll now move to the September 2021 business meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
That was the motion by Councilmember Harper and the second by Councilmember Phelps. Do we have any council discussion? Any public comment?
No hands raised.
Great, then we'll do a roll call vote. Councilmember Khan,
Yes.
Councilmember Kessler-Mata,
Yes.
Councilmember Burris,
Yes.
Councilmember Sisk, Councilmember Sisk, we'll come back to her. Councilmember Harper,
Yes.
Councilmember Giovanetti,
Yes.
Councilmember Elliott Santos,
Yes.
Councilmember Lucas,
Yes.
and Councilmember Phelps.
Yes.
Councilmember Sisk, did we lose you?
No, can you hear me?
Yep,
Okay, I said yes.
great. Motion carries and the September minutes are approved. We'll now go over council member updates. So if any of you would like to update the rest of the group on any conversations you've had, any thoughts you've had about the work of the council, even any framing messages for the rest of the council and the public, feel free to do so at this time.
The only thing I'll mention perhaps is that in talking with a couple of different groups of people, it became clear that there might be a little miscommunication or a lack of communication on our end about what we've been doing up to this point. And so since I think we all know that what we've been doing is incubating and trying to figure out our structure and so forth, I think we can do maybe that'll be part of our rollout and how we shape things in January, to really express to people like, this is what's been going on. I know that we've talked about tribal consultations coming up, but couple of folks that I spoke with hadn't heard of that. They knew, of course, about the ongoing ones, but they weren't sure if it was through the Office of Tribal Advisor or if it was going to be through Native American Heritage Commission. So kind of getting some clarity, I think, for folks about what to expect and when for engaging tribes.
That sounds good. Is there anything more specific that you can share in terms of what you're hearing? And just for clarity, the consultation letters are final. I'm just waiting on a list from the Heritage Commission so that we make sure that we're not doing it in a fractionated way.
Yeah. In terms of specifics, I would say, the perception is that we've had a year, but nobody's heard anything about anything that we've achieved or accomplished. Kind of, will we be able to get anything done? Are we just a dog and pony show? The usual kind of critiques that we can get at a state kind of level. But also, I think more significantly, it's like, how are we going to be engaged, right? And I don't mean we, I mean, like, how are we as tribal members going to be able to provide input? And what is it that you guys even want input on, right? So kind of, again, a lack of clarity about the purpose and mission and so forth.
Got it. I think I would encourage folks that you're hearing that from to attend the listening sessions and the like, just because I think we've been trying to be as communicative as possible about what's happening and where things are at. And we kind of do the same updates every month. And I think we do get more people coming, but again, I think there's only so much we can do to incentivize people to join this process. And I think even shifting the expectation from what are you all as a council doing to what is the community doing, because it is a community driven initiative, I think would be helpful from our perspective, because there shouldn't really be expectations on all of you. You are all here to receive all of what the community is wanting from this. And if there's nothing to receive, then that's how you will be limited in what you end up being able to accomplish.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I also think it might be good if so we have subcommittee meetings between now and whenever we next have our big group meeting at the end of January. It might be good for us to think about being able to provide some concrete, projection for even just the first 6 months of the year, so that, say you can expect between, January and March, consultations will be taking place or what have you. And then subcommittee meetings will be happening on these specific issues that you can attend, so that there's a lot of lead time and also specific concrete things, because I know the folks I've heard from when I've said, what about going to listening sessions? Well, what do you guys talk about there? It's like just too general for them. They want something more specific. I want to come and I want to talk about education, or I want to talk about health, something like that. So maybe having specific listening sessions on specific issues might help bring more folks in and give them concrete opportunities to participate.
Yeah, and I hear that. I think from our perspective, we don't want to tell people what they should be talking about as the issue. And so if this council does want to kind of limit how it's engaging and framing how the public engages, that's one thing. I think in a lot of the work I've been doing in this role outside of the council, there is a tension between giving people enough direction so that they can be helpful, but then also not wanting to frame how people are engaging with this work, because I really would caution against creating mechanisms that just look like everything that came before, because everything that came before didn't work. And so that's not an argument or a response, but just a thought. Councilmember Giovanetti, did you?
I was going to say, yeah, that's a good point. That I haven't heard this, but the other council members just made the comment about, is the council just window dressing, of sorts? And of course, I know we're not, but of course, some people might say that. We're getting there. We have to go through a lot of ideas.
Well, and again, I think the emphasis is it's not all of your job to come up with the ideas, and you can't work with no material, right? So I think, absent that, it is challenging to know what to lean in on and what not to. So.
Yeah, and I definitely take it as more of a like, let's get on our messaging. Let's make sure that we're being clear about what we're doing come January, so that people feel like they have opportunities to get involved. Not so much as I don't take that critique seriously, but I take that the idea that we need to be clearer with folks about where we're at and why we haven't come out with a bunch of statements and done a lot of kind of externally facing things. Yeah,
I think that's really important feedback that you got on really people want to engage on things that are kind of hot button topics to them. Totally makes sense. Whether it's when there's a dropout rate or racism somewhere or whatever, all the above.
Additional thoughts, comments, updates from the council?
I had one concern too, is that I think at the last council meeting, Chairman Santos had requested that some more information or workshops on the unrecognized and what happened to them and what is going on currently, how that is and issues that the tribes are not focused on or they're not familiar with. And I didn't know where that was going. Are we going to set something up like that, or should one of us unrecognized go and visit with Santos or whoever is interested?
We can talk with you a bit offline about what you think would be most, and I think from all of the non-fed tribal members here and leaders here, I think it would be helpful for us to understand who you think would be the best messenger for that. And then we can bring that into the next business meeting or one of the business meetings in the interim. I anticipate that you'll all still be meeting for business meetings pretty frequently, because there's like a lot of the actual work, like, training each other, training the public, and then also figuring out different subcommittee structures that you'll still be wanting to do, in addition to having the facilitated listening that we get in public comment in these spaces. But again, would very much welcome any suggestions about who you think might be a good fit to give an overview of those items. And one thing that we have been playing around with is the idea of having issue area experts be a part of an advisory body for this council, so that they're not members of the council and the expectations for engagement are much lower for people who are, very much super busy with their time and but that they could be helpful in this space. So if there's an issue area expert on recognition that you think could be helpful as part of an advisory body, that can be pulled in as needed, and then also can help review any of the documents with an eye toward recommendations, we would love to hear about that, because we'd also like to help have some of those issue area experts help guide the work of the subcommittees as well.
I'm sorry, I'm on my phone today, so I don't even know where the button is to raise my hand. And I did just want to say that I think because we're dealing in this work, I do want to understand the subject before I make comments on it. And that's why I brought that up at the last meeting, because I can only personally talk about my struggles as the leader of a federally recognized tribe. And then I also did want to see, because we've had so many discussions about their issues, And then it was kind of disheartening to see that only one person volunteered to be part of that subcommittee. So I just felt that more information is needed for us to be able to make changes or to be able to make even suggestions for changes. And I also do want to say that I realize there are people out there probably wondering what we're doing and what we've accomplished. And I agree with what you said, Christina. We also need their input. And I have tried to promote as much as I can other people getting on these listening sessions and business meetings with us so that we can hear input and have a clear direction. So I have reported to SCTCA, the Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association. I did present to CRIB that day, and we sent out the links to the listening sessions. And so I think we just have to keep promoting that so we can move forward, because I do believe that something good will come from this process. I just do think that we need some input. And like you said, if we could get some experts on the different subjects that would help us, I feel that's important. Thank you.
Additional updates or thoughts at this time?
Just on that last point that Chairwoman Santos was mentioning, I wonder if there's even some basic information from the state perspective as to what exactly the definitions are of unrecognized or non-recognized. I mean, I know we have it from kind of more federal perspective, what a federally recognized tribe is, and then the assumption is there's only a couple of other categories that unrecognized tribes fall into. But I'm wondering if from the state perspective, there's an actual clear definition or some guidance from NAHC.
There's not. So that's like the short answer. The long answer is that over time, and this is all part of this consultation that's going on with NAHC right now. But the long answer is that the way that tribes get on the list maintained by the NHC for the purposes of cultural resource and sacred site protection laws has changed over time. And it's also been a bit dependent on what's at stake at the time. So for example, at the beginning of the list, it was individuals and tribes. And so it was less of a, just tribes type of situation. It was more focused on making sure that the descendants of the ancestors that were being impacted and the spaces that were being impacted were able to engage. I'm gonna mute Chief Sisk. And over time, it has changed a little bit depending on leadership and where tribes are at. Right now, the NHC is in the process of consulting on how that list should look and what should qualify someone for inclusion on that list. But again, under state law, there is not a hard and fast definition, and there aren't regulations currently as to what would be considered non-federally recognized. And so just as a baseline, federally recognized tribes are federally recognized tribes, and we defer to the federal government based on their recognition status. Non-federally recognized tribes will sometimes refer to themselves as unrecognized. We think that's kind of a bad term because it connotes that you were recognized at some point and then maybe you became unrecognized, and that can be the case for some tribes, but is definitely not going to be the case for all tribes. And then non-federally recognized is typically the term that we use, but it's for, it depends on the context. So if you're saying non-federally recognized tribes on the list maintained by the NHC, those are the ones that have chosen to go through that process, but we know that that is not an exhaustive list of tribes that might potentially be tribes. So that was a long answer for something. And also definitely, I can say from my experience, the NHC has really struggled with how that all comes about and what it means. And then also like, what are the long range impacts of how they develop this and how they list. And so I encourage you all, if you have strong thoughts, to engage with them in that process.
Christina, I was thinking about in that regard, that your comment you just made, if as that discussion comes along and that narrative comes forward, whether it's a couple of paragraphs or a page or whatever, if we could include like a definition of what's a petitioning tribe, that kind of thing, and maybe a brief 2-paragraph history on FAP, federal acknowledgement process, that and then the amendments, what they did to try to revitalize it. About 15 years ago, I forget, 20 years ago now. That might be instructive, because a lot of people might be just totally innocent and not have any idea about, well, when did this start? When 1977, well, how long have these people been waiting? The tribe's been waiting, petitioning groups. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think particularly for this group, I think it would be worth including, and I think there's resources for this elsewhere, but I think including just that history of like recognition generally and how it came about and why it came about, and the history of termination, the history of tribes being reaffirmed or re-recognized, or all of it, I think would be helpful. And I think just off the top of my head, Mary Risling has some good background on it, but if other folks have ideas about people we could pull in for that piece, I thought when she came to one of our listening sessions and talked about some of those issues, it was like very clear, very focused on the status and needs of California Indians, regardless of tribal citizenship. And so she could potentially be someone we invite to give that overview and potentially assist as an issue area expert in that space.
That would be a neat thing to see, a 5-minute YouTube on just to tell you Hardwick and what was okay about that and what did kind of not work out for California tribes. The standpoint of what kind of resources actually were, offered to tribes by the BIA, from the BIA following that.
I really like that. And maybe that's something we try to do for a couple of different issues to make them more bite-sized. 5 minutes seems like really like a stretch goal, but given the complexity, but I have seen, and maybe Councilmember Harper has seen this too, there's out of the Autry, and I think some of the folks with NIJC, there's a little blurb about like the genocide era for Pomo people. And it's a really cool animated film that very concisely covers that topic in a compelling way. So maybe something like that as relates to like the status of tribes over time in California.
Maybe a minute and a half is more realistic. Thank you. Yes, 5 minutes could get out there.
No, I'm saying that you might need like 5 days to get through all.
Oh, the other way. Yeah, that's true.
Probably totally different conversation. Probably but I just want to flag it. I'm still wondering whether or not the NAHC has the authority to make a definition, to create the definitions that we're talking about, right? That seems like something that a legislative would require some kind of act of the state to empower, the body to do that, because it might, anyway, it's a whole nother conversation, but just big topic.
Yeah. And so like the short answer for that, and this is something that I think could really get, you could really get into in terms of, what is a California Native American and what is, or a California Indian, whatever terminology this group wants to take up. And then also like, what does it mean to be a non-federally recognized tribe? And is that like the exclusive thing that this council would defer to, or is there something outside of it? And so, with the NHC, they have the legislative authority to maintain a list of California non-federally recognized tribes and tribal individuals for the purposes of cultural resource and sacred site protection. So that's the straight up law. So it's not a an authority to recognize tribes as, tribal entities, tribal governments, or the like. And and this is the kind of thing that I'd want someone who's mediating that status and identity space to kind of be clear about, so that people can understand what the status of the law is now and where they can move. In order for there to be some process, there would need to be an act of the legislature. And there would probably need to be a lot of legal work done to figure out like what is the authority of the state to do things like that, outside of the authority of the federal government. So lots of complicated questions that I don't think we'll solve right now, but that's kind of just like the baseline of like, the list that the NAHC maintains is for very limited purposes. That isn't to say that it hasn't been pulled into a lot of other spaces for other things that are not related to sacred sites and cultural resources. But that is the limited purpose of that list.
I was thinking consultation, like the depth or whatever that non-recognized tribes can participate in state consultation. It would be another one too. I see that as being difficult for people. For some people.
Yeah, so I think it would be good to bring in someone like Mary to talk about some of this stuff. Potentially someone like Judge Abby too could be helpful in this space. So I think that goes to say that, those are folks that we'd actually want to bring in and maybe have as part of your ongoing business meetings to just talk to you about these issues, so that you can start thinking more about like what it means and what could be done in these spaces, in addition to all of the other stuff that's going on. Additional comments, updates, questions, thoughts?
Christina, if I may, I just wanted to call out, there was an informational hearing on California Native curriculum on October 27th. And for those that are following this, I know that in the archives, the hearing is presented. So that's where the Assembly Education Committee and the Select Committee on Native American Affairs had invited some folks from Washington to talk about how they enhanced Native American curriculum within the state of Washington. And I know that we're doing the same kind of work here for all of California. And I just wanted to call that out. And if anybody's interested, I have the website here. I can get my computer open back up. It's at assembly.california.gov/media-archive.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think that's going to be a major initiative of this council as well. And I know Chairman Khan, you spoke at that hearing, correct? And so maybe, if folks are interested in hearing a readout too, can connect with you.
Absolutely. I would certainly encourage them. And I know there's a lot of different tribes and individuals that are very involved in trying to change the way that California is teaching about our history throughout the state. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Giovanetti.
I thought it was interesting. And about 5 days ago, Professor Tinker in Colorado, an enrolled retired scholar and enrolled Native, spoke of what he'd put together, what he considers somewhat of an innocuous video for primary school grades in a school district there in Colorado. And he immediately was being attacked and jumped on by school people as though they didn't call him a communist, but it was really interesting that his, he's a PhD scholar in psychology and religious studies, I believe. that it'd be like people jumping on poor Vine Deloria. Like, are you serious? And he's such a distinguished scholar, a retired emeritus scholar there at the University of Colorado, I think. And so anyway, nothing's really regarded as being innocent, but that the idea that kind of a presentation that had been uploaded to YouTube could become a lightning rod for some people is like, God, I hope that's not happening in California, but I just wonder. I was talking to somebody yesterday. I said, well, I guess we should all be building backfires for some kind of level of understanding. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately the fact is that these tensions are happening everywhere. And I think, yeah, I mean, I think what's hard is when you come from the community is you see how destructive it is to your own community for there to be this kind of false narrative or incomplete narrative. So, you'll probably see this as this work gets more mobilized and when calls to action come out and as like non-native folks get more engaged in this work, that there will be some reactions. But again, I mean, I think that it's time that we shake that collective narrative about what happened here and, that it's not all like California dreaming out here and that there's some people that have been unseen for a long time. Other comments, updates, questions? And Loretta, am I missing anything?
No, I think we covered it well and did mention that the idea we were tossing around about an advisory body, which they would be, non-voting members, but that's just something to think about. But no, covered it.
Great. Okay, we'll move to the next item, which is the regular meeting structure. So I just wanted to open this up a bit because we're hoping, obviously contingent on COVID-19 conditions, which we understand are starting to worsen a bit throughout the state. But the hope is to institute the regular meeting structure starting in March of next year. And as a reminder, under the charter, you're required to meet quarterly, and it's over 2 days. And so each meeting we envision being in different regions throughout the state. We would like to start off or kick off in Sacramento for that meeting. And I've already spoken to the state library and the state archives and now the California Museum about pulling together some resources that folks who are attending our meeting could also go and take a look at and get an idea of primary source materials. Certain subcommittees will get a preview of those, but that people can go to those places, listen to oral histories that are collected by the California Museum, for example. And then also we'll collect different places that people can go to educate themselves. So for example, Sutter's Fort, the Parks Collection over at McClellan, and other spaces so that it becomes more of a moment where people can all kind of disperse throughout Sacramento and understand the legacy of both statehood and the gold rush in that area and see really the scars of some of what happened there. Obviously, we will be working very closely with the tribes in the area as well. But part of what we're looking to do with each of these regional quarterly meetings is to stand up work groups who can help us plan those regional meetings. And what we'd like to hear, with deference to the tribes, but also, open to suggestions from non-natives and also non-officials about what that programming should look like in each location. As we've thought about it further, we that it would be worth having intermediate hearings, so day-long hearings in different locations so that they're not full meetings potentially, and there may be one day, but that we're able to have you all or the representatives from your regions go to those different hearing locations so that we're not underrepresenting the state. Because for example, if you do get done on time which again may be a stretch goal, but if you get done on time, you'll have 12 meetings throughout the state, which means that you'll have only 3 opportunities to be in distinct locations. And given how much history happens in one space, that feels like it's going to be underrepresented, especially in places as big as like the Eastern region, where you're looking at, Inyo that's still dealing with things from, Los Angeles, for example, versus, the Yokuts versus Sacramento, for example. So that's just throwing that out there, that's kind of what we're thinking. And that will also that is included in the consultation call, but just so you're all aware. And then your structure is 2 days. So day 1 is a talking and healing circle. And on that day, we are going to shy away, I think, from doing broader streaming because it's likely going to bring up some difficult conversations, and we want to create spaces that are vulnerable, but it will be open to the public. We are working with Decolonizing Wealth Project to get referrals to California Native healers so that we can create a Native healer collective and collaborative that will help support the work of the council, or not the work of the council, sorry. I have the talking point in my head, who will help support the community as they think through some of the historical trauma, some of the ongoing systemic issues, just the things that they carry that they're going to unburden in this space together with this group. We have also thought about creating space for some filming and documentary of that, similar to Dawnland, but we don't want to be intruding on people's vulnerable spaces. So that will be on kind of a case-by-case basis, whether people want to have certain segments filmed or not. And you are all, as members of the community, entirely welcome to join for the Talking and Healing Circle, but it will really be more of a community-based healing space rather than kind of the information pull and the testimonial type of structure that we'll see on day 2. So it'll be very much more of a Dawnland type of structure, with day 2 being more of the testimonial narrative type of structure, which all of you need to be at. So I will pause there. Loretta, am I missing anything that is important to cover?
No, I think, yeah, the idea for the regional hearings is just to increase the amount of times that we are there to gather those narratives, and those will also be equally spread across the regions.
Great. And one thing that we are thinking about for that first convening in Sacramento is having the healing circle take place at the site of the future Indian Heritage Center as well, and kind of converging your effort with the Indian Heritage Center effort so you can cross-pollinate and get to know each other. They are not a Bagley-Keene body, so they're fine to attend. If we have the Native American Heritage Commission attend as well, which I think is a good idea as well, they'll need to also agendize and make that something that they're having a formal meeting with too. But just so that's on your radar, we're going to try to have kind of all of those things converge at the same time, and then have a bigger discussion about some of the work and how to think about all of it. So I'll leave that there. If folks have questions, comments, feedback. Councilmember Lucas, are you okay?
I am okay. I'm trying to digest all this. All of this is very, very complex. And I think there's really more dynamics and versatility, good, bad, and indifferent, involved in all of this. So I'm thinking and trying to really grasp the magnitude of this. It's a lot bigger than it looks. So again, I remind people that I don't speak for the community. I am looked at as a non-federally recognized Indian. I know Angela and I talk about meeting each other and sharing a moment. I think because we're both on this board, Angela, I'm going to make a plea to you again to put that on your schedule. I think it's important that we put our ducks in line before we get to Sacramento. I've been on the Native American Heritage Commission list for a lot of years, which has allowed me to do the work that I do with archaeologists and preservation of sacred sites, or at least listing them. I'm sensitive to the fact that I'm in a unique situation as an Indian. The terminology you've been using in this discussion all afternoon has been non-federally recognized tribes. But there's many of us that are down to the last of that band that would not be considered a tribe. Many of us grew up not understanding that we've been looked at as terminated. I hate that word. It's like somebody pointed a gun at us and said, here, you're no longer. So when our own community members refer to us as terminated or non-federally recognized Indians, and we're left out of the opportunities to engage with the community, is very hurtful. So those are the things that I'm trying to think about, is there some way that I can communicate in this arena the really adverse effect that has had to us who have learned late in life that we have a rich heritage to be proud of. You mentioned a term early on in the conversation here, if I heard you correctly, referred to us as a victim population. That really bothers me. I don't like being a victim. I know that I've been cheated out of my heritage. There's a lot of things I don't know. Because I'm looked at as a non-federally recognized Indian, I didn't have the opportunity to go to school. After the fire, I could have had HUD housing. I didn't have any of those opportunities, but I don't look at myself as a victim. I'm looking at myself as the ingredient of the heritage of our people on the human spirit who survived in spite of everything. So I think we really need to somehow come together and realize there's also those individuals that need to be heard from. And again, this is why when I got into the elders program, the first thing I'm thinking is my history is different from everybody else's. Everybody else's history is different from mine, but we can't learn from each other if we don't share that. And that's why I'm really strong on, okay, whoever's listening to this, if you've got elders out there, I don't know what your definition is of an elder, but I'm looking at somebody from the termination period of time in the 50s who's been affected by that. And when they were forced to sell their reservations and end up supposedly as part of the assimilated population, what really happened there, and what really happened to those folks as far as their land is concerned, because culturally, it's my understanding, we've all been tied to the land as part of our culture. So if we meet in this healing place in Sacramento, the next Heritage Commission thing, I forget what you call it, anyway, when we meet there, I think it's really important that we try and bring all of that together. So I'm sorry to be so long-winded, but I want you to know you've hit an emotional chord with me today. I'm trying very hard to see what everybody else is saying, because it's very different from what I experienced in 86 years. So again, I really, Angela, if you're still here, pick up your phone and let me know when you want to talk to me, because I think we need to. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Really appreciate it. Councilmember Giovanetti.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to a council person, Lucas's really thoughtful comment. I think that's really a great distinction that she is drawing there, because about the word victim, because of course we all know people human beings from any ethnicity who, but especially including our people, in this context, being a victim, people can really wear that and go, and it kind of joins together or fits with a lot of people who become dispirited because of every kind of oppression, economic oppression, racism, all the above. The legacy of conquest, colonization, and the fact of people still continuing to be surrounded to some extent and alienated from their homelands. And so I think that there is that state that, that people find themselves in, maybe unknowingly. It happens because it's been 171 years now since the gold rush in California. And so I think it's important that we recognize and remember that the difference between victim and honoring, recognizing, and remembering or recognizing the agency that all human beings have, including our California tribal persons, regardless of whatever labels somebody might want to put on them or how they might want to classify them. You're unrecognized. Oh, okay, so I hope you know your place, that whole thing. Thank you.
Thank you, council member. And I think part of this is there's going to be different ways to think about all of it. And I think from the Native perspective, it's important to view all of us as California Native people, regardless of anything. I think where the discussions of differences in status, different labels, different how you even classify people who have survived this, it's going to depend on the purpose that the discussion is for. And so, for example, there's schools of thought that say, races don't exist, so racism can't exist because it's actually a made up thing. But it's actually true that people are treated disparately based on the status that other people ascribe to them. So if I say your gender qualifies you for one thing and your gender doesn't qualify you for something else, even if that's an arbitrary classification, it has real world impacts. And so I think that's where this group needs to think about, even whether it's a good idea. That's not the way I want to say that. Whether it might be useful to talk about those differences and how the community identifies itself versus what's actually been imposed on the community and is creating real world divisions and real world consequences. Because, when I hear this group and I hear folks like Councilmember Sisk and Councilmember Kessler-Mata, and there's real pain and real lack of resources and a real feeling of inequity and unfairness because the world has been unequal and unfair. I think that we need to address that those are real divisions that have created real consequences for people, that they're carrying bigger burdens because of it, and even having that label, like you just mentioned, Councilmember Lucas. And then I think with the term victim, I'm not a total fan of it either, but I think if the goal, it'll depend on the goal that we're trying to accomplish, and there may be many goals. So to have someone be accountable for acts that they or their ancestors or people that they benefited from perpetrated, there has to be, a recognition that there was a loss. And so I think it's, again, how we view ourselves versus how the world views its own accountability is going to be something worth discussion here. And I'll just pause there. Councilmember Elliott Santos.
I agree with everything that you just said, and the word victim also is an issue for I completely understand what Councilmember Lucas is talking about also, because although we've been dehumanized and there's been so much pain and inequities, we're still here and we're still surviving and we're coming back. And we're gonna be thriving again, but there needs to be an understanding. And I guess the reason that I brought up the struggles, like I said, of the people that are not federally recognized. And I also know that even in a federally recognized tribe, unless you're a lineal descendancy tribe, you also have people that are going to be descendants of Indian people who at some point are not going to be members of that tribe. So there's so many issues. And then for Manzanita in particular, there's not the same equity that there is in where we're located. We're on the side of a mountain in a windy spot. We have a great natural resource in the wind here, but we haven't been able to develop it because of laws, either federal or within the state. When we've looked at projects, the county stands to make more money in taxes than the tribe does. And the tribal members are going to be the ones that live under the wind towers that are going to generate that wind. So sometimes for me as a leader, the idea that there's this Self-Determination Act that's supposed to help us get on our feet, but there's no business here. You know, Frances Shaw, the late Frances Shaw, was the chair of Manzanita for over 20 years, and she tried with all her might to bring some sort of business that would allow us to be the government that we should be able to be. My dad was the chair for almost 18 years, and he left this earth before he saw any successful business that could be accomplished on the land that we've been given. We live in a county where they just now got rid of a law that the county board had automatically opposing any land into trust for any of the tribes within San Diego. And San Diego has more federally recognized tribes than any other county in the United States. So I know that the work of this commission encompasses all of those things for the federally recognized, the non-federally recognized, and my only plea is that we get educated on all these subjects so that we can try to address all these disparities. And it is a dehumanization to be told you're a federally recognized tribe and you have sovereignty, but that's not really true because the areas that we're located in, it doesn't allow for that. We didn't get one speck of land that was part of our heritage and full and abundant land. Even here at Manzanita, there's 160 acres carved out in the center of Manzanita, which is now fee land because of a mistake in a homestead years ago, and it was part of the original reservation. But that's now fee land, and it's one of the prettiest spots on the reservation. So this commission has so many things to look at, so many things to think about, and how do we bring something good about? And that's my only worry. I want us to accomplish these things and to understand each other's plights in what we're all going through. Thank you.
Thank you, council member. And I think I'd like to ask if Michael or Loretta can pay close attention to some of these comments, because I'd like to keep them in the tracker for like the accountability tracker. I think one of the things that Councilmember Elliott Santos just mentioned about trust lands not even being in, the location where tribes originally are from, and then also outside of areas that are even like able to engage commercially or economically or compete because of lack of infrastructure and resources. I think that's like that one sentence could be like a whole subject for this council to look at. And it also with what Councilmember Lucas was mentioning too, because I think that what Councilmember Lucas said is actually something that I'd like to even pull for our resources about like why it's so critical to look at the needs or the status and identity issues within this space, because it actually is very personal to folks and it's having real world impacts. Councilmember Kessler-Mata.
So one, unfortunately, I have to go, but I'll be back. And then two, I wanted to mention that I still am a little concerned about moving forward with any kind of filming for the purpose of a documentary before we've seen any kind of waivers, like anything having to do with our image and likeness outside of the scope of these regular meetings. But also, I think it might help us to have a better understanding of what that healing component or healers, California Indian healers is that was referenced. I'll just be quite honest, if it's a little bit hokey pokey and we're passing around a talking stick, I'm like, that's not my show. I would feel uncomfortable with it. If everybody else is down with it, that's fine. But I feel like we haven't really had a conversation about what that looks like even to start engaging in those vulnerable conversations. I'm just wondering if we are going to have an opportunity to even address that before we start doing it in January. So just wanted to flag those things for consideration, and I'll be back.
Thank you, council member. And again, those conversations are still very much, they're still at their beginnings. And so I do also want to get away from this body necessarily dictating how folks navigate those emotional and vulnerable spaces, because I'd prefer that folks take what they need from that rather than this body dictating what they might need. But what we're intending to do is pull together groups that have different abilities and different spaces to provide supports, not to create some sort of native looking healing circle, but more have folks to help guide folks through those difficult conversations and provide tools for folks to create their own mechanisms of self-healing that don't include repressing like harmful truths, and just really kind of helping people process so that we're not contributing to cycles of trauma. But those conversations, again, are very much in their beginnings. So no decisions have been made yet. Councilmember Burris.
Hi, I just wanted to acknowledge that I also have had that word victim has been popping out at me too since this whole process first started, and we've been using that language. And I just want to throw out there that if it's really harmful, I don't know if the state's really attached to that word or anything. Maybe just using a word like survivor instead of victim might be helpful to people, because maybe the word victim's re-victimizing people. Because I think, I don't want to water down what's happened, but I think we'll be using plenty of language and having plenty of discussions that highlight what happened to Native people in the state. We'll have discussions of genocide. We'll be using plenty of, there'll be plenty of description, I think, about what occurred here. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there that, if it is really a problematic word, I think we could change it maybe if other people are feeling the same way.
I think if even one person feels that way, then we'll change it. So we'll do that. Councilmember Giovanetti.
I was thinking that, every human being has the desire, the goal, whether we know it or not, that we want to fulfill our individual destinies as best we can with the help and strength of our family and our community, our extended family, our tribe, all the above. And that that's been so blunted since 1849 in California for California tribes. The possibility or the prospect of that happening, kind of the business, a lot of the business that we're looking at here. And I was thinking of, while we have that human desire to for our lives to come to that kind of fruition or fullness so that we can participate in whatever it is that we're born into being, you know, the goals, the dreams of our family members for us, our parents, our ancestors. And I think about, and then we have the Indian Self-Determination Act, and before that, the Indian Reorganization Act, 1934. And I'm thinking about, wow, the break, the misfit, the hollowness of those acts of Congress, how they failed to provide anything other than the bare bones of a skeleton of some dollars maybe coming down to tribes from Washington. And I know that's a federal thing, but you know, everybody looks at tribes as though they're a federal responsibility only up until this point. So I'm just thinking about how disjointed that whole thing is. Oh yeah, self-determination. But how can we be self-determining when we don't have access to our resources anymore, like this discussion we're having right now? Access to our tribal lands, on and on. I just wanted to bring that up because it's almost impossible, but it can't be impossible because the human spirit says, no, we're trying to make sense out of this and improve it.
Thank you, Councilmember. And I think that brings a really salient point to all of the work this council is doing, in that it reminds me of folks who have felt that they have brought themselves up by their bootstraps, but they, you know, come from communities of privilege that have privilege within the society that's been set up in this country, and so don't even realize the relative privilege that they have in even being a member of a community that is, you know, granted more credibility just by virtue of the fact that that's how our society is structured, by virtue of the fact that you know, depending on the places that they're from and the way they speak, they'll be given entry into places like Harvard, Yale, and the like. And those trajectories actually are privilege, even if you worked hard to get there. And when we think about it in terms of tribes, giving or allowing, or I don't even know what the right terminology, but supporting self-determination without the recognition that tribes were ripped from the places where they were self-determining and self-sustaining, and could be that way, and then purposely islanded in places that they weren't familiar with and had no ties to, and then saying we support your self-determination in this place that has nothing going on, is really kind of problematic. And so I think in all of your work, framing the things that need to get done in that way is going to be really beneficial for whatever calls to action you have, because it's not going to be just, you know, treat tribes like everything else, or give tribes access to the things that corporations have access to. For example, it's, you know, tribes are down here, and you need this much more to be able to get to the place where it's even competitive, to be able to be self-determining. So sorry, soapbox is happening. I will allow other folks to chat. Otherwise, if we're good on the meeting structure, and what I also wanted to mention is that we'll be asking the different tribes in the region what topics to be covered. So some tribes may want to focus just on, like, you know, land and natural resource extraction. Some tribes may want to just have their elders come speak about their experiences. So we're going to defer to the different locations about how they want to structure their own meetings. And so there'll be a bit of a different flavor for each region, depending on what folks want to talk about. Further council discussion before we open up for public comment. And then once we go through public comment on this item, we'll do a break just for folks to get a bit of a breather. Okay, do we have any raised hands?
Also, I just want to mention that in the consultation letter, we're also again asking for location recommendations from the tribes. And so, and also about the regional planning meetings or task force, whichever title we've called it. And we're hoping, just another flag, so for the January meeting to go through a calendar of those upcoming meetings. So we'll be working on that. And if there's
And
no other,
Justin, could we call on the public participants with raised hands?
Sure, not a problem. I have a Robert Levi. I'm going to allow you to speak now.
And
Hello,
again, public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person. And please speak to the agenda item under discussion.
Yeah, well, hey, everybody. Coming in from downtown Las Vegas. With the meeting in March in Sacramento, as part of the education, I guess I'm part of the education subcommittee, I think, but even as a community member, I would like to maybe have a visitation to Sacramento State and their Indian Ed department or their American Indian Studies. They have a vast catch of curriculum items that I think would be beneficial to the education subcommittee. And then also you guys are giving me just tons of information on lesson plans for K through 12. You're talking about Indian identity is going to be a lesson plan. Talking about sharing our history. Chairman Lucas was talking about that. That's a perfect title for a lesson plan too. So again, as you guys keep on talking, and if I may be so bold to say that this would be ideas into the education committee that you're talking about what we can do concrete. Well, we're already in the education wise, we're already doing that. We have AB 1554 that will hopefully go through in January, that now is also being backed by the California Teachers Association. So again, concrete items, if you want, I guess we're spearheading what's going on. So just, lines of information. So, thank you again, you guys. You guys are doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Okay, Elizabeth Perez, I'm going to allow you to speak now.
Hi, this is Elizabeth Perez. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Okay. Elizabeth Perez. I'm from Norfolk Rancheria, Mono Indian. We're right outside Yosemite, and also former deputy secretary at the California Veterans Affairs. Served there from 2018 to 2019, and also served on the CalVet board for 7 months in 2017. So I just want to thank everyone for, just in general. Christina, I know you work very hard there in Sacramento, and there's just a lot of work that needs to be done. This is an overdue conversation. I believe that we can all agree on that. And, really for our grandmothers, grandfathers, aunties and uncles, ancestors, this truth and healing is something that is not going to just benefit us in this lifetime, but of course, those before us and our ancestors and future generations. So speaking the truth, teaching the truth is absolutely important. And I want to be able to participate in any way that I can and provide my input and my experience and in serving as California Deputy Secretary and understanding that true need. I already knew as a need for Native American veterans. We were absolutely underserved, not just in the state, but also nationally. We have the highest population of Native veterans in our state, second highest, Oklahoma is number one, but that wasn't just until recently. And we're actually kind of neck and neck there. So it is our duty as a state, it's our duty as Native leaders to ensure that we have opportunities set up for veterans when they return home, such as tribal veteran service offices. And this is something I was trying to work on while I was serving, but unfortunately, there wasn't enough people that even understood the importance of why this needs to exist, even though Governor Brown had passed legislation saying it should exist in every tribe and every tribe within the state should be able to have their own office. But with that, it just never happened because of leadership, unfortunately, and lack of understanding. But I think a lot has changed in the past over 2 years since I've served. And there's going to be a lot of positive things. I know I'm running out of time, but I want to say any way that I can get involved and have other Native veteran leaders involved in these hearings, I am all in. Thank you very much.
Can I respond to that comment?
Yes.
I think it'd be very neat for us. It would up the image of our veterans and our peoples from California tribes to have a website where we could, anyone who has a family member who has served could have their family member's photograph and the date of his or her service and their rank. That would be I've seen that in Washington, D.C. with the.
That would be beautiful. And our state hasn't done much. I'll be honest. We have not. And it wasn't until I served that you could tell a Native was serving as deputy secretary when I was there, because there was a lot of history that came out, and Chad Laurie helped put that information out there. But I agree with you. There's a lot of untold history, forgotten history of our role as Natives in protecting this country since inception.
Yeah, the place in Washington, I think, might have been, I'm not sure if it was all branches. I think it was just the naval, but it could be for any of the branches, right? I mean, why not?
And Councilmember Giovanetti, if it's helpful, I had a conversation with Chag about having something at Sac State. So I think there may be kind of a confluence of a lot of different concepts as we move forward, because he wants to have kind of a California Native vet repository there as well.
It'd be very nice.
Great. Any other public comment from the community that joined today on the regular meeting structure, locations, and topics?
Christina, could I just comment very quickly?
Mhm.
It's really a question to you. If you could just refresh my memory if I'm not clear on it. But when we have individuals that come to the council and volunteer their services, is there some type of master document that we're keeping about, that individuals could actually put their name in, their contact information, what they're interested in doing, where we can keep track of areas that, we might have needs, but areas where we actually have a lot of people that are volunteering in some of these council sessions?
We just track it in notes, but I think that's a good point, that we should just have a self-populating sign-up sheet, basically, for folks that want to do this kind of thing.
Right, somewhere that
That's
we
a
can
good
just refer to them to the website, that there's a page here for those that you volunteered, and then put down exactly what you're interested in. And then I think that would go a long way to serving the issues that we were talking about earlier about how we're actually moving forward as a group.
Great, because I think too, we've had conversations about folks tabling at different events and the like, and as things open up, that would be really helpful to have that resource. So really appreciate that, and we'll get moving on that. Other comments at this
No
time?
other hands raised.
Great. So we're going to take about a 10-minute break and reconvene around 10. It's November 2021. We're going to reconvene at 2:45. So we'll see you all in a little bit. Okay, are we back on? Okay. Let's get started. And we're now on the subcommittee updates and community input. As a reminder, we'd like to have public comment for each of these subcommittee updates and community input. And if we could keep the updates fairly brief so that we can allow for the most time for community input, that would be ideal. So we'll start with the education subcommittee. I don't know if any members of the education subcommittee would like to report out, or if Loretta, if they don't want to report out, if you'd like to give a short report.
Yeah, I can go ahead unless Councilmember Giovanetti would like to jump in. But so the Education Subcommittee did meet this month, and we're discussing a potential listening session to occur in the early year, focused specifically on education. And we also have or want to include community members on the subcommittee. And we have heard from quite a few community members that they're very interested in joining. And one of those, Robert Levi, he is at every any listening session, and so very interested and can definitely benefit from his expertise. But that is the short rundown of what the subcommittee discussed this month, unless Giovanetti has anything else to add.
No, that's it. Thank you.
Great. So we'll now open up for public comment if any members of the public have anything they'd like to chat about regarding the education subcommittee. And as a reminder, the scope of that subcommittee is likely going to be an examination of both the status and needs of Indian or of education for California Native students, but also a discussion of curriculum development, which there was a little bit of discussion earlier today. So if any attendees would like to weigh in, please raise your hand and we will call on you, and you'll have 3 minutes to provide public comment on the education subcommittee.
Robert Levi, I'm going to allow you to speak now.
Me? Well, hello, everybody. It's me again, Robert Levi. Just a quick background. I'm an enrolled member of Torres Martinez Band of Desert Kuya Indians. I have been an educator. I taught for 38 years, advanced placement, college prep, U.S. history. I'm basically working also with ethnic studies, development of Native American curriculum for them. Just a quick, they mentioned the State Assembly with the Joint Committee of Education and Native American Curriculum up in Sacramento. My wife gave testimony and I gave testimony going back to what I mentioned before about California history being implemented into the social studies history framework, working on that. Also, last Monday, we had a board meeting, Riverside School Board meeting, about the teacher who was running around her math class pretending to be an Indian. They're looking into getting more diversity and more training in the district. So that's the two main ones I have. We're also getting into the Instructional Quality Commission, trying to get more emphasis for California Indian history. And then also, anybody who's down here in Southern California, we have, Torres Martinez has our public gathering on December 11th, starting at 9 o'clock in the morning. So just a quick update and FYI. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to give public comment? You can raise your hand right now, and this is on education subcommittee.
No hands raised currently.
Okie doke, then we will move to the next item. The next subcommittee that has been stood up by the council is the deliverables subcommittee, and this committee still needs to meet. But what we're doing in the meantime is working on a tracker of the different needs that have been identified by the community and the council in both these meetings and the listening sessions. And we'll also be working on it as we get consultations moving. And really what the deliverables subcommittee was created to do is make sure that this council has accountability to the things it needs to do. And we'll be creating the calls to action that will likely look a bit like what came out of the Canada Truth and Reconciliation process, with, you know, certain calls to action that are refined, specific recommendations for policy and legislative and public change that should be done as a result of this process and the findings that you have. So that's an update on that. And as folks have ideas, you don't need to wait until the end of this process. If you have an idea about something that can be done, please send them our way, and we'll be tracking them to make sure that they're incorporated into any final calls for action as this moves along. Anything else you'd like to add, Loretta?
Nope, we're good.
Great. Any council comment on that piece? Okay, then we'll open for public comment. If anyone from the public has anything they'd like to chat about on deliverables, or any deliverables you'd like to see come out of this process. So for example, we had a suggestion in the Wednesday evening listening session that that the state look critically at the fact that there are tribes that have been co-located with toxic waste sites, and what can be done about that, and what needs, you know, what calls to action can come out of that. So if there are suggestions similar to that, or anything else that should come out of this process, we'd love to hear them at this time.
Elizabeth Perez, I'm going to allow you to speak now.
Hi, thank you. This is Elizabeth Perez from Norfolk Rancheria, and also former Deputy Secretary at the California Department of Veterans Affairs. My suggestion for that would be, if possible, to look at adding some legislation within the California Military and Veterans Code to include the Minority and Underserved Veterans Division. Currently, there isn't anything written that includes that division, which means that it's severely underfunded, and or if not, many times vacant. At this time, it's not vacant, but in previous instances, it was vacant for over 2 years. And a lot of that funding goes towards the general funding because it's just never used. And that's a lot of the things that I found that while serving, that it absolutely needed to happen. I know the other two deputies before me tried to push that. I'm not sure why, but it just never happened. And as well as myself, the 2 years I was there, tried to push that, just never happened. So it not only would benefit Native American veterans and funding for programs, and also veteran citizenship, deported veterans issues, things. I mean, there's several different funding to help us there as veterans, as a state as a whole. So I strongly encourage that there be something written within our state that does include us, since we are talking about inclusion. And every other division within that department is in that Military and Veterans Code, but that division has just never made it in there for whatever reason. And then also, even to strengthen some type of legislation so that the tribal veteran service offices in California can exist. And that's all I have. And I'm, again, willing to help with this matter and provide any input. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Additional comments from the public on any deliverables you'd like to see out of this process, or any calls to action?
No hands raised currently.
Okey doke. Then we will move on to the next item. and that is the Elders Subcommittee. Would Councilmember Harper or Councilmember Lucas like to give an update?
I can do that, Christina, and hopefully you can help me. One of the primary objectives of the subcommittee is to assist Native elders in telling their stories and helping them provide that information both in oral and written testimony to the council. And at the moment, the subcommittee is comprised of myself and Councilmember Carmen Lucas, and we met this month. And two specific things that we're looking for assistance with is we'd like additional representation or input from other areas of the state, particularly from the central and eastern regions, but any area would be more than welcome. So if there are other council members or members of the public who would be interested in working with us and exploring ideas and developing recommendations on how to conduct outreach or document the stories of elders, please let the council know. And then the second thing is we are looking at how to go about, well, we're going to be gathering and documenting the testimony of elders. And we're thinking we'd like to begin by collaborating with groups, tribes, or other organizations that may already have well-established services, organizations, or programs, or even just individuals who are interested in participating in or providing assistance in gathering oral and written testimony from elders. So we would really appreciate receiving any information or recommendations that members of the council or the public would be willing to share with us about elders programs or organizations that we could contact or reach out to begin our work. So please let us know. And then the third thing is we discussed the possibility of using an oral history program similar to, I think it was StoryCorps program. And as I understand it, it's user-friendly way to gather personal stories. And we might like to do something similar in gathering testimony from elders. And I'll let Christina or Loretta elaborate on that a little more. So that's basically what we talked about.
Great. And Councilmember Lucas?
I just want to say thank you. You did a great job of summarizing on that, but I also noticed, even though you don't have any crow's feet yet, John, you do have a little more gray hairs. So welcome to the old age syndrome here.
I'm trying to catch up with you.
I just want to reemphasize the passion that I'm really wanting from the Indian community of California to raise to the occasion. And let's tell our story as elders, good, bad, and the ugly. It really needs to be told, not for us. It's not important for us. We've already lived it. It's important for those who have yet to be born. We must correct this historic record. And the only way we're going to do that is for each of us to contribute to it. So thank you, John.
I wanted to ask if within those interviews that the Elders Committee is talking about gathering oral or written, is there room for sort of concise statements that other California Native elders have made over the years, but who have passed on? I came across one the other day. A friend sent me that she found it. She saw at a conference. I'm thinking it's one of the most elegant, beautiful statements of a man adopted by the Hoopar tribe in the 1800s, who became the grandfather of many people and who lived to be 96 years old. It was a fabulous description of what the gold rush had done to the Kuduk people, his people. And I was just thinking it was only about, what a powerful paragraph that was. Oh my gosh. Is there room for that, or do you want to keep it more contemporary individuals? Yeah.
Councilmember Lucas?
Yeah, I can't wait. Yeah, by all means, that's what I really want to hear, this early compassion, what's happening to people. If you've got access to that kind of information, please make it part of the record, but make sure it's authentic. Make sure it comes from the Indian community.
And what really we're thinking about is, with this elders project, but then also with the project generally, is doing something, as Councilmember Harper mentioned, of having a final living product that highlights some of those like really compelling stories and pieces from the California Native community. So if there is a paragraph that just really hits home, that could be part of this kind of digital not atlas, because we have that and we'll incorporate it into this, but asset that will be kind of a living tool for California generally. We've also, just for folks to know, we've had conversations with the state archives because they have an oral history project and they're asking for some recommendations on elders to be incorporated into that space as well. And you can even search that online to see what's already in existence. The readout we got from them was that they would appreciate stories and oral histories from folks that are more diverse populations. And so we would love to hear from all of you. And there's a couple of you on here that we may be asking if you might be interested. And then we're also set to meet with the California Museum, who had a California oral history project a few years back and has what they've said, and Loretta, correct me if I'm wrong, it's over 100 different oral histories that are on video in their archives. And so we're going to see what, if any of those might be appropriate, because there are folks telling the stories of different, Native peoples throughout the state and what happened here. And so if that is something that we can use in this space, we'd love to do that as well.
Could I take a minute? I found that statement, that's a really riveting statement by a 96-year-old Karuk elder who was adopted by the Hupai people young in his life. He says, he's quoted as having said, he passed away around 1981. I remember going to his funeral services. It says the Karuks or Karoks, and it has K-A-R-O-K-S, which is kind of a jarring way of spelling there. The people that spell it K-A-R-U-K. The Karoks received the most cruel treatment by the miners, killing males, taking their wives and daughters, setting fires to their homes, destroying their villages, taking their land for mining claims, and leaving no record or history to tell the story, but the scars are still there. And that was a statement made by Suwarm, was his Karak name. That was the village he was from, David Risling Sr. in 1972. I'll hold the picture up to, I don't know if you can see it. I guess you can't see it because the way our thing is set up, but there's a really nice photo of him in his traditional Hupa regalia. And to me, it makes me think that, just about 40 miles southwest as the crow flies of the Hupa tribe, the Wiots, there are compelling statements even by non-natives, but that would sort of be not applicable. But an observer around 1860 wrote that the Mad River Wiot natives of just east of Humboldt Bay, a couple miles, I'm trying to think, is maybe 6 or 8 miles east of Humboldt Bay, that when it was evident that they were going to be kicked out of their homelands, and they had these beautiful, partially subterranean traditional native homes, that they couldn't stand the idea of those homes being stolen, of course. So what they did was they destroyed those homes, they burned those homes before the militia came and moved them forcefully away from their homelands. So Warm's statement resonates with not even non-native narratives of what happened during that time in that part of Northern California. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Councilmember. And if you could if you're comfortable sending that in, we'd love to have that be part of this work, because I think that statement really captures what this council is seeking to address, is that erased history that happened along with the genocide. Councilmember Lucas?
Yeah, I just wanted to say the most important thing that I heard there was no record or history to tell the story. That's what I want to correct. I think we're at that stage in our history where we need to document this. One thing I will add, without taking up too much time, is in the work that I've done with archaeologists over the last 20 years and having my right arm attorney assist me with that. One of the things I've learned is documentation, terribly important. So I just found that comment compelling, and I thank you. Thank you for bringing that out.
Thank you. I wanted to share, I think I might have said this before I got COVID, so forgive me if I have already, but one of our principal archaeologists up in our region up here in Northwestern California, he's semi-retired now, Mr. Roscoe, he said that he thinks the reason there's so little evidence other than the occasional stark, unbelievable commentaries on the murder and slaughter of natives in California during the gold rush up until 1880 is that he thinks that the descendants of those characters that did this straight up killing actually went to DC and cleansed the National Archives as best they could, probably around during World War I. So those are the kinds of things we confront probably in every county, that these people were very studious in making sure that there wouldn't be a record if they could help it.
Thank you, council member. And again, that's something that I think this council can think about addressing, is how to ensure that this type of record does live on in perpetuity, and that it's accessible, and that it doesn't, that we combat the erasure of our people. Loretta, did you have something you wanted to add earlier?
No, it was just about the museum. I think the website said that they had resources for 100 different folks. I don't know if they have the oral histories, but that's all I was going to add.
Great, thank you. And then one final thing that Loretta and I have been chatting about, because I secretly will keep bringing this up again and again, is the concept of intergenerational transmission of these oral histories. And if there is an opportunity for us to, either through the youth council or through different tribes, have them kind of stand up programs like this through some sort of grant funding or the like, but create mini projects for their youth to capture the oral histories from their elders, so that we can have that real-time in-person transmission of those experiences, those perspectives, and those values. And so that we're helping to heal also some of those intergenerational divides, and create a bit more of a human experience for cultural transmission for a lot of tribes. And of course, we can try to incentivize it with gift cards and the like. But so I'm gonna open it up to any public comment on this piece, or if folks have ideas, or there's anything that struck a chord that folks would like to weigh in on, please go ahead and raise your hand.
Okay, Christian, I'm going to allow you to speak now.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Okay, yeah. I'm commenting to invite everybody as part of the healing, for the event. I know I came on to the meetings before, but right now we're actually in the motion for collecting the communities in different cities in our county of LA, and is basically the theme is actually the 90th procession and mass in honor of Lady Guadalupe, always forward in mission and hope, Sunday, December 5th, 2021. And basically it's a pilgrimage of the images of Our Lady Guadalupe and the Native Americans, or not Native Americans, but the Mexicans people that are, is basically a 500 year, almost a 500-year tradition. And they're in November. Today we're celebrating and doing a pilgrimage in the streets of the community of Irwin San Walnut at San Lorenzo Reese Church, and then we have tomorrow let's see, Lincoln Heights on the 21st, Resurrection Church in Los Angeles. On the 22nd, 23rd, St. Alfonso's Church in Los Angeles. 24th, Our Lady of Victory, East LA. The 25th and 26th, St. Lawrence of Brindisi in Los Angeles. The 27th, 28th, Holy Cross, Los Angeles. The 29th and 30th, St. Columkill, Los Angeles. On December is the San Gabriel Mission, Archangel, San Gabriel Mission. So, and that's in December 3rd. And then on the 4th is Our Lady of Solitude in East LA. And the 5th is the main event. Inviting all of these the communities to come and participate in this procession in East LA. We're basically like we said, like it's as a healing community. We're praying, for all of our families, that have gone through, whatever we've been going through, but it's a process of moving forward, so that's our theme this year by the Junipero Sierra, who that's his I guess his motto is always forward in mission and hope. So I think it'll be a great opportunity to see of the works that we do. And if you need more information, you could go to guadalupela.org. So that's yeah. So thank you.
Thank you, Christian. And just want to remind folks that we are commenting specifically on the elder subcommittee right now.
No other hands raised currently.
Okie doke, then we'll move right along. The next update is the Funding Partnerships Subcommittee. And I'm going to go ahead and give a very brief presentation to get everyone kind of acclimated to the agreement, or not agreement because it's not quite an agreement, but the arrangement we have with Decolonizing Wealth Project, so everyone can conceptualize it and visualize it and understand what it is. And then we can open up for some questions and go from there. So I'm going to share my screen. And Loretta, I'm going to rely on you to help me out of it.
Yeah.
You can see it?
Yeah.
Okay,
the title page. Yeah, we can see it.
Great. And if at any time anyone on the council has any questions, feel free to jump in. I can't quite see you. And Loretta, if I am not explaining things right, feel free to jump in and save me. So we're just going to go over our partnership with the Decolonizing Wealth Project, and apologies if there are any typos, but we'll fix this up and we can also post this on our site as well so that folks, in the interest of transparency, can take a look. So today we're going to go over a background on the Decolonizing Wealth Project, including their organizational structure and how they operate funds. We're then going to go over the engagement between the Office of the Tribal Advisor and DWP, and then we're going to talk about next steps that are anticipated with them. So just off the bat, this is the main DWP team. And so this is Edgar Villanueva is the founder and principal, and he's a globally recognized author, activist, and expert on social justice philanthropy, and is an enrolled member of the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina. He advises organizations ranging from Fortune 500 companies to global and national philanthropies and nonprofits on advancing racial equity inside of their institutions and through their community investment strategies. Tricia Levesque is the chief of staff, and she served as general and commercial counsel in Los Angeles and New York, and chief strategy officer for a human capital startup in London in the UK. She's worked with the Rasmussen Foundation in Anchorage, Alaska, which is her hometown, and the Alaska Community Foundation and Anchorage Community Land Trust. They've also got, I've listed the rest of their staff. which include V. Ananda, Sheena Brown, Chrissy Castro, Kwesi Chapin, William Cordery, John Okiolu, Carlos Rojas Alvarez, Vanessa Thomas, and Kara Venter. And then they've also got an Indigenous Philanthropic Advisory Group, which plays an important role in their narrative change work and shares wisdom to impact the broader philanthropic sector. And I'm going to go back because I want to just share who that group is. And then also some of the faces that I just mentioned, because some of them are probably familiar to some of you. Okay, so here is their IPAG, which includes Carla Fredericks from the Christensen Fund, Eric Stegman from Native Americans in Philanthropy, and formerly at CNAY, Jody Archambault, who was formerly at the White House, which many of you probably know, Justin Huneman from the Nota Begay Foundation, Lourdes Inga from the International Funders for Indigenous People, Michael Painter from NIA Tiro, Nick Tilson from Indian Collective, Raymond Foxworth from First Nations Development Institute, Tim Fox from the Calgary Foundation, and Vanessa Roanhorse from Roanhorse Consulting. Background on DWP. The mission of DWP is to bring forth truth, reconciliation, and the healing of our global family from the ails of colonization through education, radical reparative giving, and storytelling. They're very clear about lowercase reparations versus uppercase reparations, which uppercase would commonly be known as basically cash payouts, and are more focused on reparative actions. So actions and movement and funding that is intended to repair relationships and repair past harms. The areas of work that they focus on are philanthropic giving and practice, and the goal is to shift best practices to redistribute wealth and build an Indigenous and Black-led philanthropic infrastructure through which we can model best practices to redistribute wealth from a reparations approach. Racial healing, which the goal is to create and facilitate decolonized resources, tools, and spaces that promote personal and organizational transformation and advance diversity, equity, and inclusion. And narrative change, to leverage the power of our storytelling traditions to bring visibility and change to issues impacting BIPOC communities through digital projects, media engagement, and strategic partnerships. This is the basic structure of DWP. With a fun little graphic, but they do not operate under a board of directors, but utilize staff and advisors for its general operations. And those are the folks that I just spoke about. And then for each of their discrete funds, they stand up an advisory body that it administers based on the unique needs of that fund. And so these are like, let's say this is, CTHC fund, this is some other fund, and this is another fund. And those advisory bodies will inform the work of the DWP. So this is how the fund would operate, is that the DWP creates an advisory body that's representative of the community. And just to clarify, DWP, again, does not have a board of directors that directs what it does. It's an organizational structure, and then it creates these funds that operate under the direction of the advisory body that are stood up. So it's representative of the community and serves as the board of directors for each fund, relying on the assistance directives and engagements of its partner organizations. DWP then provides support by seeking funding and administering the funds, with the goal of getting dollars out to identified priorities and communities as soon as possible. And then DWP deploys funding based on the direction of the advisory body or any other parameters they have instituted for each fund. So DWP does not have executive ownership over how things go. They will implement the executive directives of the advisory body and any sort of parameters that that advisory body has put on the fund. DWP and Office of Tribal Advisor Engagement Overview. DWP has entered into an engagement with the Governor's Office of the Tribal Advisor, or the OTA, and DWP will provide us with additional capacity and resources to better serve the needs and priorities of the council. We'll inform the work of the DWP based on the expressed needs and priorities of the council and the funding subcommittee. Other funders and relationships are welcome to assist in the work of the council. So DWP is not like the only group that could be doing this work, but is helping us in this capacity and is an easy partner if folks have funds that they want to pass through to other priorities as well. The council and the funding subcommittee will, in collaboration with the Office of the Tribal Advisor, stand up the advisory body and the parameters for the CTHC fund. So the CTHC would be one of those discrete funds, and the advisory body could be just the funding subcommittee, or it could be the funding subcommittee and other additional advisors from the California Native community. And that would be up to the funding subcommittee as to who they think would be right for that mix, but also with keeping it limited enough in size so that decision-making and fund distribution doesn't get clogged down in process. So really what DWP has expressed for that subcommittee, or not the subcommittee, for the advisory body, is that they'd like it to be California Native folks, but then also for all of you to think about is having enough diversity of viewpoint, or at least positioning, that if and when folks are conflicted out because of either personal, financial, or professional relationships, that there are enough folks to make informed decisions in that space. So this is a summary of engagement. I know it's a bit small, so I'm going to read it out loud, as I do with everything. So they're going to provide some philanthropic engagement. Working in deep partnership with the OTA and the funding subcommittee, DWP will leverage its experience and relationships with the funder community for the following. They'll convene and facilitate a group of California-focused philanthropists and donors to build relationships and serve as ambassadors for the work of the council across the philanthropic sector. Develop and execute a grant-making program to support the engagement of Native American families and the healing opportunities presented in this process and advance the broader objectives of the council. And galvanize philanthropy to support recommendations from the council's report. They'll also engage in narrative change and digital storytelling. Audience landscape, they'll perform, and this is not an exclusive list, audience landscape analysis to inform the development of key narrative change campaign messaging. Attendance in council meetings, including the presence of a videographer and production team. Facilitate stakeholder calls to gain deeper insight and understanding into the council and its goals. Honor Indigenous traditions of storytelling by developing a cohesive, compelling strategic narrative framework and campaign messaging, culminating in a meaningful call to action. Respectfully leverage influencer and celebrity engagement to elevate awareness of the council and the stories. And collaborate with film production professionals to plan and develop concepts for the digital storytelling asset. And then finally, they'll assist us in standing up the healing and wellness resources. So they'll facilitate introductions of California Native healers and wellness practitioners to the Office of Tribal Advisor to assist with the creation of a healer collaborative to guide the community, and will facilitate funding and other supports for that collaborative. The goals that they have expressed and that we've developed together in partnership are these 5 goals, which I'll also read because I know that it's quite a lot of text. Goal 1 is to convene an active California-focused funder table to serve as ambassadors for the work of the council. And they'll support the facilitation of the table and engagement with the philanthropy subcommittee with the goal of raising dollars to support community grant making and support for healing and communications. Ultimately, the table will partner with DWP to advocate for field-wide support of the council's recommendations as well. So those calls to action will also be integrated into the work of fundraising so that those calls to action can actually be made real in partnership with the private community. Goal 2 is to launch a grant-making program and fund to support California Native American community members and engage in the work of the council, Goal 3 is to deliver a narrative change campaign in 2022 that catalyzes deeper community, Native and non-Native engagement in truth and healing conversations, and builds political will for truth and healing work in other states and at the national level. Goal 4 is to produce a documentary or docuseries or other digital asset to share the story of the council and the work of truth and healing in California. And goal 5 is to support the delivery of healing and wellness offerings to the council and participants. So next steps is there is a project manager that they're seeking. They're seeking to secure a qualified individual or organization to help manage the DWP deliverables on this end. And they are looking for people who have both experience in managing projects like this, so grant projects and engaging with philanthropy, but also folks who are not going to pull away from or own this process because it's meant to be a tool of the council and the community rather than shifting the focus to another space. So this is also a link that I'm going to open real quick too. And really what they're seeking are either individuals, firms, or organizations that could assist with this work and will be engaged in deep communication with our office to make sure that everything is going the way it needs to be going. And then form the CTHC Fund California Native Advisory Body. And so whether that is made up of just the subcommittee, the funding subcommittee, or if it's made up of other folks, that's something that they would like to hear from this council. And then also create, once that advisory body is up and running, the fund parameters so that they can create that fund that goes out to the community. So they'll need to think through eligibility, funding limitations, any sort of thing that would come up in that space. So I'm going to stop sharing at this time and open up for council discussion if there is any, but I'll also share this presentation with all of you so that you can kind of think through it a bit more and we can talk about it offline as well.
And again, the grant fund, we will be soliciting on what those priorities are and what those needs are from the community. So for example, I think we've mentioned it before, if folks say that they need childcare in order to participate in the meetings, there could be a process where they apply for that small grant. And so that's just an example of what that community fund or the grant fund would could ideally go to.
Okay, if there's no further council discussion, we can open it up to public comment on this piece. And again, this is the funding partnership, so anything related to funding or philanthropy or our engagement with DWP.
And DWP will, come in and formally meet with the council in one of the next meetings, but we wanted to give you this brief, overview of their organization, just to give you some more background before that happens.
No hands raised currently.
Okay, then we will move right along to academic partnerships. Would Councilmember Phelps or anyone else like to report out from that committee before we open up for public comment?
And I just wanted to flag, I see that Councilmember Kessler-Motza joined us, just for the record, to include that in the minutes.
Kusla, would you like to say anything, or I could take it?
Yeah, I'm going to defer to you for now, Robert. Thanks.
Oh, great. Thanks. Anyway, no, we've been meeting regularly. One of the things that we've been working on is we've created a mission and a vision value statement, actually instead of values, goals for the committee, because we'd like by the end of January of next year to start going out to academic institutions and individual scholars to seek their assistance in collecting the information that we're seeking. And so we thought that we would really need to formulate something more formal about what the Truth and Healing Council is, what this academic subcommittee is about, and what we're seeking. And so we're going to start sending out formal letters there. So we thought it would be best to create a mission and vision statement as well as our goals. And so we're finalizing that. It's actually written. We just have to have a subcommittee meeting perhaps in December to finalize it and then bring it to the full council for approval. Beyond that, just one thing that we've constantly talked about is perhaps creating a center for Indigenous research. And when I say a center, I don't mean a physical building. We mean an institution, which could be virtual, and this is something that speaks to, for example, the interviews that the Elders Committee is doing. where we have to have a place to put things. And it can be a virtual space and a place of whatever research we conduct that all of the tribes and all the communities throughout California could actually access it, again, preferably virtually. And we think that that is important, not only in regards to accessibility, but because, and this has been addressed at various occasions throughout the last year, the work of this council is never really going to be finished. We can't really address what's gone on in the last 200 years in 5 years. And history does not stop. It goes on. It continues. And so perhaps some of the committees might consider, like we're considering, creating some type of institution that after this council is finished with its work, there could be either a privately funded institution or something aligned with the state that continues the work of this group. And so that's why we're starting to talk about, okay, well, when 5 years is up, where are all these materials going to be held? Is it going to be held at the state level, or is it going to be something, just that's going to be held by Indigenous communities throughout California? And so we're kind of talking about what exactly is that. Kuslo or Anthony, do you have anything to add to that? Or Loretta?
I have something to add, I think. And this is not directly addressing what you were just summarizing for them, but I wanted to add to a conversation I kind of started during the meeting, and maybe you could call this a call to action, where I had been thinking about what Councilmember Giovanetti had said at our last monthly meeting about these inaccurate histories that archaeologists have created, and the problems those have created for tribes, and that, maybe this is already implied by the very nature of what we're doing, but that at the end of the process, there could possibly be some kind of way that the state says this is officially the new record in history of this, and in conjunction with tribes agreeing with whatever we've compiled at the end, and that this thing that this archaeologist wrote is not correct, and you should not go to that if you're looking at doing some sort of official process that looks at a history, and you should be coming to the work that this council has done. So officially saying Kroeber was incorrect when he said Ohlone people were extinct. So says the state of California. Something like that. I don't know. I may not be wording it quite correctly, but I thought that maybe that should be one of the end deliverables of this council, that we create some process for saying this is the official history, and this is the history the tribe agrees upon, and that stuff those archaeologists wrote or anthropologists wrote is not correct.
Councilmember Lucas, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I think I've said this before. That's one of the things I worry about with like at state parks up there in Sacramento with all the artifact and archaeological records, and somehow we need to access those, and particularly if there were comments made by elders, and capture that. I worry about, I just want to add two more things on what I heard here. Putting stuff virtually on the record, and maybe I would like to see hard copies as a backup. And I think I've mentioned this before. One of the things I'd like to see is state library curation facilities, Native American orientated and for the purpose of Native Americans in 4 areas within the state, but that all 4 of those institutes have the identical information in the event one's disturbed by an earthquake or fire or something like that. The other thing is when you say intellectuals or scholars, you wanted to interview them, if I understood that correctly. Are you looking at scholars from the collective American Society, or are you looking for California Native scholars that you want to interact with? I'm not clear on that, so I'd kind of like to have some clarification.
I don't think we fully decided that yet, but I think we're thinking of casting a wide net. And when we're talking about interviewing scholars, not talking about interviewing scholars, we cannot, the 3 of us, do all the historical research, right? Or even this committee cannot do it, this council cannot do it. So, we're looking at different ways to get accessed or to get some of this work done. It could be that, for example, if we have a private institution coming in and giving us some funding, we could actually create a system where graduate students could go out and do research that this council deems that is necessary to be accomplished. So we haven't fully decided who would do it. That's a really large discussion, but there are some scholars that we might want to approach that we deem might be directing research that might be useful for the narrative here. The one other thing I wanted to add is that, you know, we are also discussing, and this is a big topic, about who owns this history. And for example, if you do an oral history with a particular tribe, maybe it's so sensitive that they don't necessarily want to share it widely. And so we have to come up with systems by which we determine how is this oral history going to be accessed, who gets access to it, and under what circumstances.
One thing I'd like to add to that is I'm okay with all of that, but I think we need to be very careful, even within the Indian community. If you're asking a scholar to put something to record for you, I had a personal experience where a so-called native scholar wrote a document for a group in San Diego and put something in there that I had said, and I don't ever remember having a conversation with this man that wrote that. So that kind of stuff bothers me. So I think you really need to stipulate in there that whoever's giving that information needs to be given the courtesy of reviewing the draft before it ever gets final. So
I also have had an experience like that where an author in the preface of his book acknowledged me for helping that person with interviews, and that person never had talked to me. I thought that took a lot of nerve.
I agree.
I wanted to say that some of these inaccuracies, it makes me think about one of the statements or the field notes of Robert Heiser that he published about his work among the Yurok back in the 30s, or I think he published it in 42 or 46. But he talked about the medicine men and their work and how they went about predicting when the salmon would actually come up the Klamath River, you know, those 4 runs. And Heiser, this famous anthropologist who's buried next to Kroeber, they were colleagues. He said that the medicine man was superstitious in how he went about, you know, projecting when the salmon would be coming up the river from the ocean. Very interesting.
Thank you all. And I think, well, I'm just going to say a couple things, and then I think the subcommittee still has a couple of comments. But one thing is that this subcommittee, the goal is to help create capacity for this work by engaging in partnerships. And so, you know, what one thing could look like is engaging in a partnership with the language department at Berkeley, for example, who has primary sources of people telling their own stories, and has these massive language archives as well. And that, you know, whether and how the council wants to engage with them, this subcommittee will think about whether that's useful in this space. Other things could be maybe an institution approaches the council and says, hey, we really want to look at, you know, the historical laws that took away certain rights for California Native people, and we'd love to help you with that. And this subcommittee could vet that process as well to make sure that either it is affiliated with the council or it's not, because it's extractive and offensive and all of the things that we don't want this process to be. So that's kind of what they're working with right now, is thinking through how to best engage in relationships that will help facilitate the work of this group. And I think the second piece that I'm hearing from Councilmember Lucas, Councilmember Burris, Councilmember Giovanetti is that we've got to make sure that there's something in there so that this isn't extractive, and so that there's an element of consent in anything that is expressed as the history of a people, and that it needs to have the buy-in of those people in order for it to be part of this work. But then there also may be space in this work itself, which could either be a call to action or something that we actually work on while it's happening, to acknowledge traditional cultural property rights, intellectual property rights. And we can actually, we know a couple of people who are really good at that. So we could have those conversations as well, where, you know, as people submit things that are actually from their own experience and culture, that they're benefiting from it in some way or have some authority or control over what is used and how it's used. Additional council member comments. I know Councilmember Kessler Mata, you had unmuted for a second, so.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much to potentially talk about, but I think one thing to emphasize is that in January, we're hoping to start really engaging, you know, everyone more, right? Whether it be California Native academics or institutions that hold collections, or, you know, folks in the communities that have had issues with scholars. Like, we want to come up with a variety of different approaches so that we can't, I mean, I think we don't feel that it's right for us to make arbitrary decisions on our own. And we want to be sure that we're hearing folks out and that we're learning from the way people have proceeded in the past. So, for example, there can be contentious, right? So I get what Anthony's saying, but I just thinking of the Central Coast, right? We can have contested histories amongst different tribes, right? there's not necessarily going to be one shared narrative that even the tribes are going to agree on. So we have to kind of make sure that we're finding the best approach for capturing all of that in a way that is respectful to everyone. And that's hard, right? So, and other scholars have worked on this, but so have, you know, folks in the community have worked on this for a long time. So I think our hope moving forward is to really start bringing people together so that we can gain insights and perspectives from folks, again, both in academic communities, but also not, right? So from the tribal communities, what, you know, has worked for them, what has not. And we've heard a little bit of that in the past year from folks that have called in to different, I think, listening sessions and our full group meeting. But we want to be more systematic, I think, in how we start thinking about the problem sets, partnering with institutions and organizations and individuals, and then making sure we have milestones, we're meeting benchmarks and so forth. So really starting to put some concrete actions into place for next year.
Thank you, Council Member. And one piece just to think about in the vein of Councilmember Burris's comments are, you know, the integration of recent laws of deference to traditional knowledge and how that may play out as processes like this move forward. And so, like, for example, in the cultural resources and sacred sites space, you know, I think the state wants to defer and is charged with deferring to traditional knowledge when it comes to, you know, things like AB 52 and other types of laws. But how that plays out, given some of the dynamics that Councilmember Kessler Mata mentioned, it's going to be, in some instances, really ugly, and in some instances less ugly. And so I think even just having the conversation about what could be a consensus view forward, even if it's not across the board something that everybody loves, but is also not the worst thing in the world, to make sure that those spaces and sacred sites are adequately protected and not, you know, based on a minority view of what needs to happen. I think, you know, it's worth the conversation at least, so that the Native community doesn't end up getting taken advantage of in this space. Are there any public comments on this item, the academic partnerships? And we go on tangents and then I tell everybody to stay on topic, but I'm going to reiterate, we're sticking to academic partnerships if there's any public comments at this time.
No hands raised currently.
Okie doke, then we'll move right along to the Youth Council. Loretta, do you want to give an update, or I can give a short update as well? Or if Councilmember Elliott Santos is comfortable.
So the youth subcommittee did not meet this last month, but I think still the goal is to have a convening of the youth council or just a kickoff event. We don't have a concrete day in mind yet, and partially because on the back end or on the front end, Christina and I are looking at contracting with a Native PR firm that'll help our office with this work and help us put on that event, because it will be a large undertaking. We're looking at like possibly a 2-day event. So we don't want to get ahead of that. So we'd like to have the support in place before nailing a day down. So other than that, I don't have any updates at this time.
Great. And we've also in our consultation request asked about certain elements of this. So we've asked a couple of questions that span across all of your subcommittees, and we'll make sure you all have a copy of that consultation request just so you can see it as well. Any public comment on or council member discussion on the youth council?
I wanted to ask, have we gotten very far on our actual definition of youth? I remember us almost laughing about it, like, is it 12 to 18 or is it 12 to 26 or what, so, or 20.
We've heard the entire gambit of age ranges, and so we have not nailed the definition down. And part of that, I think, will come eventually, come out with the convening and just talking with the youth.
I'm looking forward to seeing that become more delineated, because I have some children and grandchildren of people I went to school with who are attending local colleges. I'd love to tell them about this once we get it figured out a little bit more.
Awesome. Well, we will move forward. And I think part of it is we want to listen to the youth themselves about what they want to see out of this as well. So we don't want to necessarily get ahead of them either, because they may have completely different ideas about what's young and old. So
my nephew told me that 21 was old. So I have no idea what the age range is. So it'll be interesting to hear from them.
Great. Any comments from the public at this time?
No hands raised currently.
Okie doke. Then we'll move right along to status and identity. The short update on this, oh, we do have a raised hand, it looks like. And this is again on the youth council.
Sorry, I was on mute. I'm allowing you to speak now.
Excuse me, I hit the wrong button.
We can hear you.
Oh, no. I did not mean to hit the button. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Okie doke. Then we'll move right along to status and identity. And the short update here is that we are looking for folks that are able to mediate these conversations. And what we're really looking for, and maybe we'll just have to put a request for proposals or qualifications out for this, but we're looking for people who can very clearly outline what the current constraints are for folks that have but have barriers to status and identity as California Native peoples, and can very much both facilitate a conversation that will be really complicated and difficult and have a lot of weight to it in a way that is productive and doesn't cause offense, but also helps folks to understand what the current limitations are so that we can have something productive and some good calls to action come out of that process. And so what we're really looking for are people who are well suited to navigating some of the emotional and weighty issues that come up with some of this work, but then also have a sense of the legal parameters around all of it so that we can actually have some really good actionable ideas. So if you know anybody who's good, we are thinking that it should be someone who's a little bit removed from the community, just in terms of, as we talked about earlier, labels carry something with them. So the minute that your label does one thing or another, that comes with a certain perception that may or may not be accurate, but is something that will impact the work itself. And so, for example, even the tribes that we come from have, a significance. Even the way we talk has a significance. The schools we went to, the initials after our names and things have significance. So if folks know of people who have good tact, a good emotional support system, because this is going to be difficult work, but then can also help people move in a direction of actionable ideas, we'd love to hear those ideas from you. And you don't need to say them in real time, but that's what we're looking for currently, so that those conversations can get moving. And again, they'll be on a parallel track, but also will be integrated into the calls to action, with the idea that we'll also have a technical advisor who will help integrate all of it throughout the body of this work. And with the same charge that all of you should be thinking about everything through the lens of intersectionality in California Indian country. And so that all of the things that you're thinking about, listening to, and processing should account for all of the different needs, issues, priorities of all California Native people. And Loretta, do you want to add anything on that?
No, we're good.
Okay. Any council discussion? Yep.
I'm just wondering, I would think that in the process of doing the tribal consultations, some of that information could be or would be gathered. But also perhaps if the committee is, I don't know what the structure is that the subcommittee is considering, but thinking about whether or not they should have not advisory, but a kind of some, maybe, I don't know, consistent contact with various unrecognized or non-recognized groups that want to have, a say, right, in how they're represented or thought about on the council.
Thank you. And we'll incorporate that in as well. I think what we're looking for is someone who can help facilitate that in a way that's respectful and deferential to tribes, but also like tactful and can help navigate all of those very complicated systems. There's one more thing I wanted to add about that. We are looking at action-oriented people and want to make sure that we're not inviting folks who may contribute to controversy. So that's, I think, something that it would be important in this space, is we're really trying to go toward healing and healing across California Indian country, and want to make sure that these discussions are, while they will inevitably get heated because they're very personal, that this can be helping folks build bridges rather than create deeper divisions. Is there any public comment? Oh, Councilmember Giovanetti.
Yeah, I wanted to say that I think that obviously that would include us being wary of anybody who's narcissistic and how they go about this type of work. It'd just be, I know we want out of that situation in a heartbeat, and we want to prevent that from ever happening. But it's such a problem in our society because people are so damaged. So many people are so damaged. Poor people, rich people, doesn't matter. Narcissism is like a cancer in society. So I know it's just one of and a small army of problems, right, for personal development. But comes to mind.
Well, and I think what we'd like to do, even in the healing space, is start also kind of chipping away at those barriers to being productive and engaging in a way that's healing and beneficial. So chipping away at like all of the barriers of ego that prevent people from connecting in a real human way. Because we see that in policy work too, that ego gets in the way like 99% of the time.
So I think what you're talking about is authenticity, people being genuine, being consistently who they are behind that mask, because each one of us wears many masks through our lives, necessarily so, because we play so many roles. And knowing what to do with people who are stuck behind a certain kind of a mask that's not productive for the society or for themselves or for their family. Identifying those folks and doing whatever we can to be healthy with them.
Yeah, I think it's taking off the mask and then also in yourself noticing when your ego is triggered, so where it's someone's doing copy edits over your writing, or whether it's someone, taking credit for something you did, and like whether your flare up of ego actually serves the work or whether it's just ego running rampant like it does. And I think it's hard in this society where people who grow up in the United States of America are raised on hyper individualism that really emphasizes the ego over everything else. And so you want people to have enough ego that they're willing to speak up when they need to speak up, but like also can tone it down when it's just a flare up, I think.
This picture I have behind me, I think about, my great grandma is the lady in the dark dress. And I'm thinking like, she gave me a lot. I never got to know her, but I'd like to feel like I could do something honorable in saying something about our people to represent her, her story, her survival, her dignity, her honor, her love. And I think we all feel that way. But it's not about me. It's about honoring and remembering who we come from and what we come from, and acknowledging that, and not thinking somehow we pulled it off on our own, learned anything on our own.
And I'll show you all a secret, and you'll have to ignore my ring light. But in all of my offices, I keep all of my people up there to remind me.
I love that. They're all talking to you while you're doing your work.
Yeah, and I got them all smiling, so they feel less judgy. But I think pomos just come with smiles. I think we're born that way. We like to joke a lot. I'm going to open it up if there's any public comment on this piece. And I think what I'd like to do is, what I'll do is have a quick update on the consultation timeline, and then we'll just open up for general public comment if that's okay with folks. But understanding we're at time, if you need to drop, that's totally fine.
And again, if there are any recommendations for somebody that could help us facilitate these discussions, because the work of the council in general the wounds are deep, but it's especially deep for, something so personal as status and identity. And so I think we'll definitely benefit from the Healing Collective. And but again, if any community members or council members have any recommendations for facilitators for these conversations, definitely please reach out to us.
I think I have one. I'll send you one or two names of people I'm thinking of. They're extremely busy professionals, licensed and all that, but also extremely cultural, wise culturally in troubled ways in California. But they're so busy. Maybe they could just facilitate one or two groups or something like that, or events or something like that. But that's my concern for them. And I don't manage their schedules, but I admire how much work they do, but oh my God.
Well, and if they could even be helpful in an advisory capacity, we'd love to hear about that too. Because we don't want to underutilize folks who could be really helpful in these spaces just because they're doing everything all the time.
Kind of a random thought, but I mean, I think there's folks like Hillary Rennick, right, who is recognized and kind of respected by both federally recognized, unrecognized. Working with TPO, she does a lot of work, right, with various tribes across the state, helping protect sacred sites and so forth. Something about somebody who, kind of transcends those different categories and understands the complexity, because of course Pomo country is just as complex, right, in terms of lineage and such as any other part of California. So, and how all of those rearrangements happened to create the now existing federally recognized tribes. So I'm just thinking about somebody who might have that type of story arc. Of course, she's, like Joe was saying, super busy and would be hard to probably get her, but somebody who has that kind of rapport with folks, I think would be great.
The couple of names I was thinking of is would include Rita McDonald from the Yurok tribe. She's an MFT and super knowledgeable in the depth of this hurt. And also Richard England from the Yurok tribe is an enrolled member, also an enrolled member of the Yurok tribe, is a really super busy LCSW, licensed clinical social worker, and he lives in Grants Pass. But he's a traditional hunter and fisherman who knows a lot about traditional ways and about that hurt, that whole schism of res Indian versus urban Indian. Oh my God, that unnecessary whatever rift or problematic claims or whatever. But anyway, yeah, he grew up as an urban Indian. Well, for that point, I did too. I grew up 60 miles south of my tribe's rancheria when we were still a rancheria. But anyway, those are a couple of names I would suggest. But boy, I know their schedules. I admire their schedules. But just like Christina said, maybe just even in an advisory capacity, they're so wise. Like, that's just a couple of people in the north. I know every region has to know many people like that. That maybe could help.
Really appreciate it. And we'll write those down and may reach out on the back end to chat with you a bit more about it. Do we have any members of the public who wanted to chat about the status and identity subcommittee?
No hands raised currently.
Okie doke, then I'm going to move us along and very quickly give you an update on the consultation request. I got an update from NAHC that I'm getting my list on Monday. So it'll go out Monday. It asks all of the questions that we've just talked about, and we're asking for responses by January 31st. So folks will have plenty of time to get back to us with written responses, even with the holidays. We also welcome one-on-one meetings. So if folks want to do that, we can do that. And while we prefer, again, virtual and conference call right now because of COVID, we can consider on a case-by-case basis doing these meetings in person as well. We'll just have to have some chats. But again, the governor's office next week is moving into a more COVID-friendly space, so that, it is potential that we could meet with you in Sacramento, or we can come to you if that's easier, and we'll just limit our numbers and make sure that we're practicing safe measures if that's easier for folks. So that'll go out. We'll let the council take a look at that as well once it's out so that they know what we're asking the community. And there'll also be a public facing version that if folks want to weigh in, we wouldn't consider it tribal consultation, but we will have a public facing version for community members to weigh in as well. I'm going to go ahead. We're after time, and I'm going to reach out on the side to find a good meeting time for all of you for January for your next business meeting. I'm going to say it'll likely be after MLK weekend because I find that people tend to have a bit slower starts after the holidays, and MLK weekend tends to be the time when people start getting into gear and moving forward. So we will reach out to you for dates, but I would say it would be safe to block off your calendars now if you can, and put some holds for, sorry, I'm looking at a calendar. Probably the 28th of January as an initial check-in, and then a status update of where we think we're going to be able to, or what we think we're going to be able to accommodate with the March meeting. In that meeting, again, we'll confirm with all of you on the side before we make any sort of arrangements. But in that meeting, we will update you on all of the meetings from the subcommittees, any other additional contracts that are in place, any other tools that are in place, and we'll have a draft of the strategic plan ready for you so you can kind of visualize where you're, as an outline, could go in the next few years. And unless there are any questions on that, I can open it up for general public comment.
Christina, will that be the regular 1 to 4 p.m. meeting of the council? Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, and I anticipate that what it'll look like starting next year is you'll still have virtual check-ins unless there's no more public health emergency, and then you'll need to think about whether you want to do those in person. And those will be for meetings like this where you're just moving the business along. And then you'll also have the first big meeting in March, and then thereafter have intermediate hearings and locations, and then big meetings in the March, June, September, and December. Okie doke. If there's no other council member comments, we'll open it up to public comment on issues not on the agenda.
No hands currently raised.
Okie doke. Then I'm going to go ahead and adjourn this meeting. If there are any final thoughts, Councilmember Lucas?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question. If we could be provided with an update on the Heritage Center before March.
Absolutely. And so and maybe you all want to come, well, it's not under this work. So I think you could come because it's not under your charge. So the Indian Heritage Center Task Force is actually going to go do a site visit before March, and maybe you can all go with them and take a look, because we can also have you check in at that Parks collection at McClellan where all of the baskets are, and then also potentially meet with the state archives and the library. So we'll give you an update on that. And just for the public generally to know, the Indian Heritage Center Task Force, which is made up of representatives from California tribes throughout the state, is going to have a public-facing meeting after the holidays to give everyone an update on where things are at and announce the firm that they've selected through some very long and painful interview processes, which some of you may know because you've got council members on the task force. And so there will be an opportunity in January for you to engage as the public, and then we can also see about coordinating a time for all of you to visit that outdoor location as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I anticipate that this work is going to start converging with a lot of the other efforts that we're doing at the state level, so would be good for you all to start cross pollinating sooner rather than later. And if there are no public hands raised, then we'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting, and we will be in touch for listening sessions will still happen next month. Subcommittee meetings will still happen next month, and we'll also be reaching out for finalizing that date for January.
I just wanted to say happy Native American Heritage Month. The governor issued his proclamation today. Check it out.
Happy Native American Heritage Month. Thank you all for joining.